Hi, I'm Sam White, and I'm the Senior Product Manager for the Container Security Group. Today I'm going to be doing our release kickoff for the 1310 release, but first of all, and more importantly, I just want to cover a little bit of our strategy for the security orchestration category that we have and talk about what we're working towards and how what we're doing in 1310 is our first iterative step towards our long-term vision. So that being said, you may have seen some of these mocks in previous discussions or meetings that we've had with our container security group. Our long-term vision for policies is to allow users to come in and create scan execution policies. And these scan execution policies define when a scan is run and enforce that scan to be run in a way that the developers and maintainers on a normal project are not able to change or disable it. This is important because today developers and maintainers have full access to that GitLab ci.yaml file. And so if a user is trying to enforce a scan to be run as part of the pipeline, it's a lot of work to always keep up on that YAML file and make sure that it hasn't been changed in a way that disables or breaks the scan. So these policies will actually enforce that job to be run. And in this, we plan to provide a simple UI editor. So you see this, if this, then that English sentence style policy, where you can come in and say, if a pipeline is run for the master or default branch, then I want to require a DAST scan to run, for example, with your specified scan profile and site profile. And you could also configure this to run on a given schedule and enforce it to happen as well. So on a daily or weekly basis, if you want to make sure that a scan is run, you could use these policies to do that. Typically in an organization, the application security team, or in some cases, the compliance team, would be the one writing these policies, enforcing them for the organization, and making sure that these scans happened in a way that the maintainers and developers on an individual project were not able to disable it. Down the road, we want to add support for all of the different scan types, all of the different scanners that we have here in GitLab. And we also want to have the ability to support full policy change logs, so you can see the history of changes and who made them, as well as two-step approval process, so that no one person can propose a change, so that people can propose a change, but they can't make a change without approval from their application security team. All of this is a lot of work, and it's not very iterative when you look at this end state. So we wanted to break this down in a way that we could get something out to users rather quickly that they could actually use and take advantage of. In this, you see that we allow both a rule and a YAML mode editing. So if users want to edit the YAML for these policies, that's possible. All of this will actually be stored in a separate repository that holds that YAML configuration. So for our first iteration, even though all of this user interface is nice and easy to use, for the first iteration, we're planning to just solve the problem of separating out those duties to allow those security teams to write these policies in a way that developers can't change them. So when we focus just on that, our initial iteration is going to be much, much more simplistic. We're going to require our users to create what we call a security policy project. And in that project, they'll put the YAML defining their policy. They can then come to their production project to the new security and compliance policies page and link to that security policy project. In that security policy project, they can now have a separate set of users who have developer and maintainer permissions. So they have that separation of duties. They can control who can propose and commit and merge in changes to those policies. And again, in that YAML, in that project, they can actually define what those policies look like. So for that example that we talked about earlier, if they wanted to require a DAST scan to run for every time the master branch pipeline was triggered, they could do that by requiring it to run with the specified configuration. Of course, the user experience is the thing that suffers in this case. So we're planning to quickly iterate on that to bring the full user experience that I demoed initially to GitLab, but this will allow us to at least release something rather quickly and get that out to the end users right away. It also comes with a huge advantage in that because we're storing this in a repository, it lets us quickly add support for the other scanners much more quickly than we could if it were stored in our GitLab database or in some other data store. So although we're planning to support DAST policies out of the gate for 1310, if we wanted to add support for SAST or any of the other scanning capabilities that we have in GitLab, it opens the door for us to do that rather quickly. Hopefully this was helpful. We do have a epic that summarizes our overall iteration plan on how we're planning to go from this YAML repository until ultimately we move fully into the UI editor, where that associated security policy project will be hidden away, with the thought that users should not have to worry about where these settings are stored. That's a lot of cognitive load on them to process that. They should be able to just use the UI and have it work at the end of the day without worrying about all of the nuts and bolts in between. So it will be an iteration path towards there, but for now, we're starting with this super minimal step in 1310 so that we can get something out the door and start getting feedback. Again, if you do have any feedback to share, please feel free to add it to that epic, and we look forward to hearing from you.